A. John le Carre's The Honourable Schoolboy is a follow-up to his novel Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Schoolboy was originally published in 1977, and it continues the story of George Smiley and the circus, but moves it in dynamic and different directions. After the discovery of a Russian mole within the British Secret Intelligence Service, the organization needs a win to help rebuild trust. So they look to focus their efforts on a bold new operation in Hong Kong. This book expands out well beyond the scope of the first in the Quest for Carla trilogy. It's a globe-trotting spy story with more action, set in exotic locations like Italy, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. It deals with news reporters, narcotics dealers, and military coups. There's also much more bureaucracy at play, as Smiley and his allies have to navigate the complex waters of international politics in what comes to be known as the Dolphin Case. Jerry Westerby, a minor character in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, is a major protagonist here, as he's the circus fieldman in Southeast Asia. He's the titular schoolboy, a simple and straightforward individual, though perhaps a touch naive. But as the title implies, he's also honorable and moral, a good person who's thrust into a cutthroat world of deceit and betrayal. The novel relies on an interesting technique, where the chapters typically start out with gossip and rumors, then gradually move towards solid facts. There are curious flips to the present tense, which help bring an immediacy to the events, and the espionage jargon is easier to deal with than it was in the previous installment. Here, the book actually takes the time to define the unfamiliar spy terminology for readers, which is helpful as we try, along with the characters, to piece the puzzle together. The Honourable Schoolboy is concerned with the issue of power, how it's acquired, who truly holds it, and what lengths they might go to in order to secure it. It's ultimately a cynical look at the modern tendencies towards conspiracy and power jockeying. Within the confines of this spy story, that perspective is certainly telling, but it takes on even greater weight when the novel applies that same critical lens to the complexity of colonial relationships. The first time I read the novel, it was from this Penguin edition. It's a trade paperback that has a cover illustrated by Matt Taylor. It features a Chinese dragon in reds, yellows, and oranges, and it's coiled around two figures, one in black silhouette to represent the unknown enemy, and one in white with glasses, meant to represent the character of George Smiley. There's a foil application for his glasses, for the outline around the dragon's face, and for the author's name, which is prominently displayed above the title, also in gold. The spine has the author's name displayed vertically, which is a design element that carries forward from their previous Le Carre releases. The two parts of the novel have simple title pages with a similar display used for individual chapters, which each start on a fresh page and begin with a simple drop caps. This version features the 1977 foreword to the novel, where the author thanks many of the people who helped in his research throughout Southeast Asia. Then a 1989 introduction, also from Le Carre himself, where he discusses the political landscape at the time he was initially writing the book, as well as recalling some of his experiences writing on location for the first time in his career. This introduction is spoiler-free. Recently, I was lucky enough to stumble on a copy of the first edition at a used bookshop. I don't normally collect first editions, but when I saw the end papers on this one, I just had to bring it home. They look like maps taken right out of a circus file folder, complete with stamps identifying the case, sea and air travel routes, and annotations. The front papers focus on China and routes to Hong Kong, while the back papers zoom in on Southeast Asia and track a route through Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand. The shorthand notes and code, the faux pen lines, and the stamp details give these amazing end papers an authentic look that's really above and beyond anything else I've encountered. The fact that they're both completely unique is fascinating, and they're full of cool little references for those familiar with the novel. Now, I've already upgraded to Folio's edition of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, so I kept my eye out for their edition of Schoolboy, as I was eager to see what they would do with the second book in the Carla trilogy. So let's do this. Here we have The Honourable Schoolboy from the Folio Society. This version was released in 2010. It's presented in a plain, gray paper-covered slipcase. The binding is done in gray buckram, with a cover image of a cargo aircraft and a junk blocked in a wine-colored silhouette, with the mountain peaks done in a pumpkin orange behind the Hong Kong skyline. On the spine, the author's name is printed in silver above the title, with a figure portrait, this time of Jerry Westerby, in that same wine color, with the publisher's initials at the bottom in silver. The binding is appropriately finished with dark gray bands. When we open the novel, we're met by plain gray end papers and a heavier stock. The book is printed on Abbey Wove, Folio's standard paper stock for the text block, which is smooth, acid-free, and comes in at a warm white color. If we bring back the Penguin edition for a brief side-by-side, we can see that the Folio Society version is bigger, with an extra 3 centimeters in the height and 2.5 centimeters in the width. The text may be a touch smaller in the folio version, but it is spaced nicely, with more generous margins than the paperback edition. Each of the novel's 2 parts has the number and title spelled out in all caps here, with the individual chapter numbers and titles spelled out as well, and each new chapter begins immediately after the previous one ends. The same 1977 foreword from the Penguin paperback edition is provided here in the front matter, now labeled as Acknowledgements. The interior artwork, like the cover image, is by Tim Lang. He's an artist who works in a variety of mediums, and he has illustrated for the Folio Society before. While he does work in paint and color, a lot of his artwork is pencil drawings, as is the case with the 11 interior illustrations he provides here. Like his illustrations in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, these are cold, tense images that don't feature any facial details to help emphasize the sense of secrecy and uncertain tension. The artwork is presented on the same paper as the text block, and the images all fall right next to the text that they correspond to, which is appreciated. Let's take a detailed look at that artwork now. The first illustration, the frontispiece, is set in Italy. Protagonist Jerry Westerby is attempting to write a novel in Tuscany when he receives a telegram calling him home. Here we see the back of the young lady he lives with, who watches with folded arms as he leaves to answer the message. Her anguish or frustration is evident in her posture, and the darkness around the window frames the Italian hillsides nicely. The reflection effects on the windows are fantastic, and indicative of the impressive realism that will be on full display across the rest of these illustrations. The second image is of Peter Gwilym on the phone with Connie as they try to shape the future of the circus. The detail in this drawing is exceptional. From the phone and cord to the cuff and seam of his shirt, the value control is crisp here. At times, Tim Lang carefully blends the graphite, but he cleverly lets the line direction show through when it adds to the image. This can be seen in the shirt, and even in the background, where it emphasizes this extreme angle against the vertical position of the figure, adding dynamics to an otherwise straightforward layout. The third piece is of Jerry Westerby, who fights the fear and dismay he feels in Hong Kong as he embarks on the first phase of his mission by imagining that it's the old days and he's surrounded by backup and watchful eyes, rather than being a lone operator. He bounds up the stairs to the bank, and the staircase extends up through the whole image, with Jerry's legs just visible near the top. The fourth image is from a scene that occurs in a cemetery. Westerby retraces the steps of a man named Drake Quo, whom he is investigating. Quo has just left the cemetery, and Jerry determines that he was visiting his deceased son Nelson's grave. At the bottom of the statue's plinth, a bunch of orchids sit fresh, still in their paper. The composition is interesting here, with great contrast in the value, and impressive realism on the stone, the flowers, and the surrounding grass. The next illustration is of Mrs. Pelling, a woman George Smiley is interviewing to attempt to gather information about her daughter Elizabeth. Pelling, with drink in hand, sprawls on her bed going through old letters, postcards, and photographs. On the wall behind her are snapshots of her daughter. Again, the value work for the wrinkles in the clothing, the lighting, and the realism of the drawing are very strong here. The sixth illustration is the most George Smiley image ever. As Smiley agrees to set the wheels in motion on the next phase of the dolphin case, he unconsciously subscribed to his own legend by polishing his glasses with the fat end of his tie. This is a signature gesture for the character. Again, the realism of the drawing is impressive, from the buttons on the cuff and jacket to the veins on Smiley's hand. This one is my favorite of the bunch. So iconic. The 7th illustration is from an unsettling scene in Hong Kong, as Jerry Westerby and his reporter buddy pursue a police tip about a murder victim. They follow the sergeant past the waiting room as the reader is assaulted with imagery, the stink of the formaldehyde, the green tinge of the hospital tile, and especially the old chipped trolley which carries the body covered in a white sheet. The whole scene builds in tension to the reveal of the identity of the victim, and that grim sense of tension is evident here, right down to the shadow of the uncertain onlooker. The next illustration is of a parked cargo plane, as Westerby bluffs his way onto an airstrip and searches the hangars for a particular aircraft. This battered DC-4 Carre sits on a crumbling tarmac. There's a man here taking inventory as the plane is loaded. So much of the Southeast Asia sections of the novel deal with aircraft, especially because 2 of the key figures in the investigation happen to be pilots. The next illustration is a view from the shoulder of the road, as Mikey's borrowed Ford car burns. An explosive device was placed in the gas tank, and the vehicle seems to burn first and explode afterward, flipping and collapsing dead and flaming on its side. The darkness of the smoke, the background, and the car help the glow from the fire pop off the page. In this illustration, Westerby is parked in a rental car as he waits outside a luxury apartment building in Hong Kong. There are great architectural details, and the dashboard of the car is also wonderful, but the rear view mirror is the real point of interest, as the car Jerry has been waiting for hisses up the slipway behind him. Moments later, he pulls out after this vehicle to follow along in pursuit. The 11th and final illustration depicts a moment from the climactic scene. It's a moonlit night on the island of Po Toi, and the characters are down at the beach with the Hammerhead Cliffs behind them. Suddenly, the sky turns yellow as the helicopters roar down with searchlights. One of the individuals on the beach is snatched up, and the helicopters lift back up. The darkness of the image is perfect here, and this subtle crackle effect through the sky only adds to the disorienting chaos of this harrowing scene. The Folio Society edition of the Honourable Schoolboy is frankly a step up from their edition of the previous title in the Carre trilogy. Rather than 9 illustrations, it's even more generous, with 11 pieces of art. And while it would still benefit from an original introduction, at least it features some front matter via the author's acknowledgement. Like Tinker Tailor, it's the cohesion of the overall design that stands out here. The gray motif, from the slipcase to the binding to the end papers to the pencil artwork, threads everything together and keeps it nicely in series with the other books from the Carre trilogy. Now, when it comes to my paperback edition of the Honourable Schoolboy, I'm ready to move it to the box of doom, so I have more room for more new books. As always, thanks for watching, and keep an eye out for future videos. When it comes to the stories you love, it's always worth upgrading your books.